Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 13 of this season. And it's a special day because today was the release of S26.1. And what's special about point 1 is usually Maxon releases a new version of Cinema a month or two in. It's usually like a Service Pack 1, usually just straight up bug fixes across the board, make sure things are working properly. But this time they added in a bunch of new features that some of them are really powerful, really important. I've known about this for a couple of weeks now, and it's been tough in the live streams to... We've been doing a bunch of things with the rope simulations. I keep being like, well, Field Forces doesn't work with it, so we can't do that. And then I was like, oh, but it will soon, but I can't say that. So yeah. How is everybody doing today? Yes, Tim, you are correct. Of the track name is Synth1. Really love Ronald Jenkins' music. Elaine, yes, it is definitely a major update. It's the biggest update that they've done that wasn't a full-on like 0.5 release in like forever. Like they used to do like whole module releases. Like MoGraph was originally released as a module. You know, those were super crazy days back then. Anyway, we'll be looking at a lot of the new features, although I will be taking questions. If anybody has any questions specifically in regards to the new features, like it's a good time to ask them. I wish I could remember some of the specific limitations we were running into during some of the previous live streams, where it's like, oh, we wanted Field Forces and whatnot. But for now, I'm going to pop open just a couple scene files. Let's take a look at some of the features, maybe talk through them just a little more off the cuff than in my recorded video. So let's switch on over to the desk. Uh-oh. It's doing that thing again. I have to... it forgot the monitors, so I have to... How do I fix this? Well, here's what I'll do. I'm going to temporarily put Cinema on this monitor, so nothing is popping up that shouldn't be. It's showing my chat window, but you see here that I have to go in here, and I'm going to have to edit while it's still going, change the desktop to display 2, and yeah, that's what it's supposed to be showing. Go figure. Boop. Okay, now here we are in 16.105. And let's just start talking about a couple different features in it. One thing I was actually just tinkering with before the live stream started. I didn't have a... Well, I like the demo I did for it, but there's a couple changes to the volume builder. And essentially they updated, because the volume builder is Cinema 4D's implementation of OpenVDB, which is, I think, an open source thing that does voxel. You know, it calculates voxels and it meshes them. It does a great job of doing it. So it's been updated and it's quicker. I have, in my own testing, found it to run faster, which is cool. But the other big feature that was in it that I think is significant is the idea of this radius. You'll see as soon as two objects are fed in, and essentially if this is merging in some way, then you get this radius slider. And in this example, well, let me make it a little more simple. Reset this PSR. Boop, or reset transform as it's now called. So you see these two things are blobbing and merging into each other. Actually, I can show this even a little bit cooler if I do a second sphere. So if I move the second sphere down here, you see that these are colliding with each other. But, you know, very kind of harsh transition there where they meet. But now, if I grab that sphere, it is now doing a union with the one underneath it. So we can start increasing this radius. And as I do, you can see we can get them to start blobbing like really nicely into each other. So we see that same effect here going from the cube to the sphere. I'll move the sphere above and say that that will be a union, but let's get a bit of a transition going. You see how these will start kind of blobbing in. It's almost like the voxels are blurring. But you'll see here, if I do a nice large radius, and also, by the way, something I didn't know is if you right-click, you can type in a value, but you know, because this isn't a proper edit field, it's just a slider. But in any case, grabbing that sphere, you see that as I pull it away, we're going to get this really nice, almost like drip type thing. You see, you know, this kind of egg shape that we're getting, where without that radius, pull that way back, you see that, you know, nothing there. So yeah, that combination by itself, like these just merging, and then on a per object basis deciding how things should melt into each other. So very cool. I like that a lot. And then, so that's one big feature is changes to the volume builder. Even just it running quicker is pretty huge. The two huge changes to simulation stuff. In my video, I was trying not to do too much with plugins, just a little bit at the end, but we can do that now a lot more easily. What's something simple? Let's make a figure. We'll make a volume out of the figure. And a little bit more resolution. Perhaps inflate it a bit. Yeah, not go too crazy. So yeah, we've got this nice mesh. Actually, why don't we feed that into a remesh to make that look even nicer? Yeah, and symmetry on X, so that gets mirrored. Probably be good if that was not quite as far. Let's do, I don't know, 1.5. Yeah, fine, I'll do 1. I'm trying to get so the legs aren't quite merging. I guess we just need more resolution for that. Actually, that's not surprising. But what's cool is we should be able to increase that resolution and then via the remesh drop it if I don't want like that many subdivisions. So yeah, that's actually a really good natural combination to reach for. So taking this mesh and putting it into my plugin, it is mesh to spline. So if I feed that directly in, I've now converted that mesh parametrically to a bunch of different splines. If I were to make that editable, then we can see that different sections are going to, like if I grab one of these loops, you see how that's just that ring. But if I grab this, it's probably gonna be a much larger, you can see that's it's a complex spline that traveled all the way around. That's just using the built-in Cinema 4D edge to spline algorithm. But now that's parametric, and what's cool about the new simulation stuff is we can make all the changes we want without making this editable. So I can add the rope simulation onto that. Control D, go to CPU. My computer still prefers CPU. And hitting play, currently there's a small radius on there. If I hit play, then we're just gonna see these, well, currently there's a radius and they're intersecting each other. So you can see them popping away, which by itself, this is stuff we could have already done. Looks pretty neat though. Something I mentioned in the video that's a good idea, just workflow wise, is I've been shrinking the radius way down, and then over the course of not even that many frames, but like let's say 10 frames, that will now go up to 0.5. So now it's not going to have such a harsh pop there. Although, it's still drifting. Maybe they're just, I guess it is relatively small, so that's a significant radius. Well, anyway, let's not worry about that detail, because what I wanted to talk about was our ability now to go to simulate forces, field force, and now field forces actually do something. Basic version, let's add to velocity. We need something in there, so let's add in a random field. And now we can see that, hopefully, yeah, we now see that these are drifting around, essentially from this random wind. But field forces unlock so many possibilities inside of cinema. So us not, essentially it being one of the most advanced things in cinema, and the new simulation stuff being one of the new advanced things, and those two things not working together, we are constantly running into that limitation, but now we don't. Something I was finding, like a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of areas where we're going to end up using field forces, but something I love doing is feeding, essentially in the field force, feeding the exact same spline that's going to be running the rope simulation. And I don't want to see all these little lines, but now every one of these individual lines is now dictating the direction it should be traveling. So just by hitting play here, we'll see that, let me give us a bunch more frames. You can see that these individual, each of these kind of like snakes are going to be drifting based on its own direction. Now that leads to some interesting capabilities. Let's change this to set absolute velocity. So now we're saying every single part of it has to be moving at a particular speed. So look at these beautiful little swirls that we're getting. Like this shape was kind of naturally spiraled, so it's just going to continue spiraling forever. And some of them will sneak away, some are going to stay kind of near this area. It depends on your collision radius and everything. But I think that by itself is pretty cool. It's going to be dramatically different depending on how much you change your bendiness. So if something is not very bendy, you'll see that it's trying to maintain its shape a little bit more, and things can travel. Things have larger arcs and they're actually moving away. Meanwhile, if I say, no, these are like super bendy, and I change it, you'll see they're actually not going to drift too far away because they're free to bend, so they kind of get trapped in this loop where they move forward and then the piece behind it moves in the same path, and the piece behind it moves in the same path. So they end up looping, but I think that's a cool look. So very simple way of implementing that directly inside. Feeding the spline itself. I'm trying to think of what else I would immediately jump out with that comes to the field forces. Not too, nothing else immediately jumps up. Let me turn a fan on. It's getting warm in here. Anyway, I just wanted to show maybe just one more demo, and then we'll start looking at the chat and playing around. Now, I actually literally showed this one in the video, but I think it's so cool. Why don't we do it again? I'll even do it from scratch again because it's neat. Actually, you know what? If we're going to talk about dynamics, I got to just show that object crunching things up demo because I just think it works so well. So as mentioned in my main video, and I'm going to keep referencing that main video, and if you haven't watched it, I'll put a link in the chat. Where is it hiding? Here it is. Copy URL, paste in the chat, paste in the other chat. And yeah, for anybody who's just popping in, then yeah, we're talking about the new features that came out in the point update, the 0.1 update. But anyway, here is the scene as it used to exist, I think. Oh, let's put on both. So I had actually made this demo for my S26 video, but I couldn't quite get it working. What I wanted to do is like crush different models inside here. And it's like, okay, that's doing a cool job of crushing, and it's tearing it apart. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. I even ripped it. But now it's like, oh, but wait, these pieces got stuck. They're trapped in these rollers. And it's like, in some ways, it's like, well, maybe that could be a good thing. But essentially, the model is sneaking through, and I don't want that to happen. And now they changed this single setting. Essentially, the only thing that changed in all of Cloth is this. And it's so important. It changes so much. And they added in collider side. So instead of looking at the front and back of a polygon, we can look at just the front or just the back. In this case, we want to look at just the front of these. So essentially what that means is if one of these points sneaks through the wall, it can freely move back through. Where before, if it snuck through, it got trapped on both sides of the polygon, which is what we just witnessed. But now it doesn't get trapped on the other side. So if I let this play through, you can see that, okay, it's crushing it really well. And look, it didn't get stuck. And now it goes through the thinner roller, and it didn't get stuck. And now we're going through this really cramped one, crushing all the pieces down. And again, nothing's getting stuck to those rollers. Like an absolutely amazing addition for such a simple setting. And as I showed in the demo, and anyway, this is all, change this to whatever we want. Let's, type in, well, let's type in 26, but I'm not sure if those will be able to sneak through properly. Let's see if the rollers catch them. Whoop, whoop, come on. Oh, yep, okay, nice. So both are getting pulled through. But anyway, if we change that into, I'm going to say that these colliders are going to not be based on the front, but be based on the back. Essentially, that means all of these want to suck the object inside of it. So you'll see when I hit play that these are going to get sucked into those and get torn apart until just the pieces are trapped inside. And I know, it's pretty funny. Turn off the colliders and all the pieces should be free to fly out. They'll get sucked back in again. So they'll set it to front and all the pieces get flung out because they're not, essentially not allowed to be inside anymore. Really, really cool. That adds additional options for us when it comes to even some very simple cloth applications. In the video, let me see if I saved the scene file. What would that be called? Field forces? Nope. Nope. HDRI materials. Oh, I think that is this. Hey, I did save it. So let the material load in. Hopefully load in. Yeah, there we go. So I was working on the statue, and even here, how do I show this? I had, I put in the volume builder. If I turn off the volume builder, you'll see that this is actually a slicer. I sliced it up a whole bunch of times, but I didn't like the way this has like way too many polygons for the calculation. So I just blobbed the whole thing together. So anyway, I end up with a relatively low poly mesh. I didn't even overthink it, but I wanted to start draping some cloth onto it. So I said, okay, statue, you are a collider and you're only viewing the front. By the way, front is the default setting, so it's already should work out of the box. But here's like a piece of cloth. So pretty straightforward. I think it's pretty close to default. I just made it very bendy. It's the only thing that's changed. I think even, yeah, in the overall settings, nothing, it's all default. Actually, not entirely true. I cranked up damping a little bit because I wanted them to not wiggle around too much, or I wanted them to stop swaying back and forth. But anyway, if I play, you'll see that very quickly that will roll, it'll play forward, and now we got that perfectly draped on the top of it. But, and then let's see that one, no, this one, this one pretty straightforward as well. It's completely outside the model, and I just wanted to, I had it very vertical, so it's going to layer up on top of itself a lot of times. So super digging that. But I wanted to have a whole bunch of cloth on this shoulder as well, but it wasn't fitting as much as I wanted it to. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's only doing a front collision. So here you'll see I'm horribly intersecting these. In fact, why don't I turn on both sides? If I play here, you'll see that anything on the inside is trapped inside. Anything on the outside is trapped outside. So, not working terribly well for our purposes here. But if I say only look at the front, I'm going to actually try and frame by frame this, see if we can see it. You'll see that anything that was intersecting, it seems like the points are actually trying to pull out. And then over the course of just a couple frames, all of these are being forced out of the model to essentially the quickest place they could escape from. So you can see here it's also pushing out, pushing out, pushing out. And those have now fully escaped, and I was able to have a much larger piece of cloth without even thinking about it, escape out of the model and then land properly on the top of it. You got to be careful with it. I mean, that's looking great. I mean, the way this layers up, I'm very, very pleased with. That can be thrown into a subdivision surface, and you get this nice piece of cloth draped over it. As a word of caution, you can't push this too far. Right here, I kind of made sure to not push that too high, because if I push this up a little bit higher, then it's going to be quicker, I think, for these polygons to sneak out above it. So you'll see now as I frame forward that those are getting pushed out, but they got out above like the hair bun here, meaning those are kind of trapped up there. So it didn't do everything I wanted it to do because I pushed it into a spot that it couldn't handle. You can see they're still trying to recover and pull out of there, but even with that nice little workaround, keep in mind, a couple limitations. Anyway, jumping into this character. This is the same character I used in my simulation presentation for Maxon when I was at NAB, and I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, but essentially, I'm just taking different parts of the body, extruding it out. You can see that the shirt is just a piece of geometry slightly extruded away from the body. The body is animated. I manually keyframed it, and it was kind of a pain, but it's a Mixamo animation that loops, but it had to be in the T pose in the beginning, because otherwise how are you going to make clothing for it? But in any case, so this is a collider now. In fact, why don't we do it the bad way again? And here's a shirt, and here is a pair of pants. For the pants, let's belt it on. So I've already got the top ring selected. So right-clicking on it, simulation, cloth belt. And I would like to set, we have to set it onto the model. And then clear, set. And it's important to drop your influence a little bit. Otherwise, it's like 100% trying to pull it in. Maybe these defaults should even be lower. I think like 90-90 is fine, but I'm going to go 50-50. And that will just stick it to the model better. And now we need to make both of those simulations. So simulation cloth. Not even going to change any defaults. Hit play. Oh, and of course, we're looking at this with the old method. So hitting play, we'll see the character, and everything's wrinkling and folding fine. But as soon as the character jumps, let's let him straighten up. You're going to see a whole bunch of problems here. You can see that the pants have gotten pushed through the legs here, and in the back, the knees have gotten really messed up. And it's because the model, the actual animation, folds over itself. And so the polygons have to go into one side or the other. They just have to. There's nowhere else for them to go. And there's no way to escape that. The only way to have avoided that in the past was to make sure that your model never passed through itself. But that's never going to happen. Not with any kind of motion capture. So, but now we can grab the original collider, the character, and say, you're only looking at the front side. And now do the exact same thing again. That's the only thing that's changed. And now as the character bends, it does force it through, but then it immediately pops back out again. So essentially in an animation, I don't even think you would notice that that's happening. And now look at this great clothing animation, just working like as simple as I can out of the box. Like I said, these are all default settings right now. Even in the main simulation settings, look, these are all the defaults. We could be cranking up the collision passes and adding more sub-steps, but these are defaults and they're working great. So having said that, like pay attention to the shirt and the way the shirt is currently wrinkling. And it does wrinkle. You can see it's bending and it bends over itself a little bit. So that's some wrinkling. Let's try dropping. now that this works so well, let's try dropping the bendiness down to 0. So now it doesn't want to bend very much. I mean, it can still bend, but you see now it's not wrinkling at all. It's only kind of bending where it's forced to bend. But now let's give it like tons of bendiness. I'll jump at, 555 is a good like maxed out kind of number. And now as he jumps, you can see that the shirt is very naturally wrinkling up. So that those types of things are just working immediately. So, and then I had, taken essentially the shirt and modified it into this vest. And then, well, I guess we'll just throw it on there. Let's add on a simulation cloth and we'll say it's very bendy. And bendiness is fine. We could make it a little stretchy, but we'll just do bendy. So now we've got cloth on top of the character, and you can see it jumps and it's just layered up. It's working pretty dang well. And then lastly, I have this crazy kind of raincoat or hood. We'll add a simulation cloth on there. I'll make it super bendy as well. We got a decent amount of friction. I'm not sure what that'll do, but I'll say a lot of friction, so maybe it'll stay stuck in his head. But now cloth on cloth on cloth, even on top of the pants cloth, on top of the character, running pretty well, like here in the viewport, all at default settings, and it's pretty dang good looking cloth. Quite pleased with that. And like I said, this is relatively clean, relatively low poly. But, if you add more, you'll have more subdivisions. But, there's potentially additional tricks to get extra wrinkles and whatnot. But, I don't know. Any of the cloth stuff we had in the past, like, I don't know. It's almost like we didn't. Even though we had a cloth, it never worked like cloth. It never worked like clothing. But now it does, which is very exciting. Dark, thanks for subscribing through Prime. I appreciate the support. I'm going to go and check through the chat, see if anybody has any questions about any of the stuff. There are additional features to talk about, but I just want to put a little groundwork there for anybody who wasn't familiar. Hello, Jess, probably tuning in from London. Somebody else from London and London. Look at all the London. Let's see, Volume Builder getting better. Yes, the new release. Nurpara, I appreciate it. Cloth is amazing. Yep. JDC, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Apparently Matthew is saying that I'm streaming, Adobe's streaming, Pixelogic is streaming, and Boris FX are all live streaming right now, which is pretty crazy. Okay, but no specific questions over on YouTube. Let's check all the chat from Twitch. Hello, everybody. Lucky episode 13. Congratulations, Alex, for starting a new studio job. Could you put negative values in the balloon section of cloth to deflate the geometry? That's as a little standalone question. Yeah, that is totally something we could do. Let's make a ground to collide with. Simulation collider. Actually, let's steal one of the things we'd already done, since we should have, I've got this thing already inflated for us. So I'll pull this up and be SSAO, and we'll change the color, make it pop a little bit for the stream. Pink. Okay, and then simple simulation cloth. Now, the resolution of your mesh is going to be super important as far as how bendy it is. Should set that to CPU. So if I play, you're going to see it's going to crumple pretty heavily, and there's not much you can do to make it very stiff. If I grab the bendiness and I put it down to 0, it will be more stiff. You can see it suddenly jumped, but it's not like, this isn't like a stiffness setting. It's just saying, well, it doesn't want to easily bend, but obviously it still can. And this is going to be super dependent on your polygon count. So just to throw it out there, actually, let's see how well we can demonstrate it here. Let's say I drop this down to 10, instead of 25%, we'll drop it to 10%. And now there's so few polygons, you can see look how much stiffer it looked like that was. Like, that's pretty stiff overall. That looks kind of fun. Now let's double it from the original 25. So the original 25 was still collapsing a lot, but now we've doubled that, and now look how it's like just completely falling into a pile. So your resolution super has a huge effect on how bendy something is. Now, there's not much to do for that. Make sure your quad diagonals aren't double. I think they changed the default from single to double, which is good. And But besides that, the only option we have is balloon. If we turn on balloon, that's going to, as long as you have a volume, as long as this is a model that is airtight, then it can inflate. Or if we just say 1, that's trying to maintain the current volume. So that will actually help a little bit, and it takes a little bit for this to transition. So I'm going to say it's quicker, so it only takes 5 frames to transition in. If I hit play, you're going to see that because it's inflated, you can see the like head kind of extra inflated and whatnot. And even you can even see some, it's actually pretty interesting. When the head hits, watch that little, like, it's almost like the head is full of air, and when the head hits the back, it sends a little shock wave through the arms because suddenly the head's deflating when it hits the back, boop, and then the air, it gets pushed into the arm. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, going back to the original question, let's turn off gravity. So now it's just going to do essentially nothing. It's just drifting there. And if we give it some overpressuring, we can start to inflate it, and we can inflate it more or more. And so, you know, pretty fun. Drifts away. That's happening because it collided with the ground. But the question was, can you under pressure something? And yes, you totally can. I'm going to make a larger transition time. And you do not have to under pressure very much. It's actually a bad idea to go to 0. But if I say, let's go slowly. Let's say 0.8, so close to 1. And immediately see, like, look at how much volume was lost. So now let's say 0.5, and I was trying to pull out half the volume, and look how flat the character's getting already just from 0.5. So let's do 0.25, cut that in half, and like, yeah, look, very little in the volume. Now let's try going to 0, and that should essentially pull all the air out. Yeah, but essentially this is what I've started. What starts to happen is there's no space there, and all the polygons start pushing against each other, and it's going to essentially add energy into the scene. So having a bit of air in there is better than having none. I'm not sure how far down we can go. Like even at 0.1, it seems to be adding a little bit. But yeah, you know, totally, you can totally use that for deflating. I wonder, this actually might be a good chance to play with some field force. Let's make it very bendy, first of all. I'm going to say 0.25, which seems to be a reasonable number. So it's very bendy, and you see, oh yeah, a very different kind of collapsing because it was very bendy, so all the suction went down. I think that looks pretty good. Let's, you know, once again, 555 is a very bendy number. So it looks great. Let's try giving it some more polygons. So easy to change with this remesh. Man, we've gotten some great tools inside of Cinema in last couple versions. Whoa. Okay, so twice as many polygons, double the resolution, and yeah, similar collapsing, similar like deflating effect. But you know, the more polygons you have, the more you can get like these really neat looking wrinkles. Of course, that entire thing will look better in a subdivision surface. So yeah, look, that's so cool. So yeah, totally deflate that. What I was going to say is, I wonder if we can use a field force on here. It's not going to be the quickest because this type of field force is always slow-ish. But if I say simulate forces, field force, and in the field forces, I will say I want to feed in the remesh. So we're seeing this mesh. And I want to look at the surface of it. So if we have our display turned on and I crank these up, you'll see that we're actually getting, well, that's kind of weird. Oh, interesting. Look, there seems to be a bug right now where if the axis moves away from the viewport, it disappears. What's funny is, okay, so that's a little bug inside of here. But what's funny is that's a bug we had actually accidentally done in one of our own plugins one time, where when the axis went away, the entire thing would stop displaying. So, okay, little bug there. That explains an issue I was having with that earlier. But anyway, you can see that all of these essentially have little needles that are facing out from the model, which means this is the direction. So I wonder if we can treat this as kind of an inflation effect or a deflation effect. So back into our cloth, I'm going to say don't balloon, so it's just its natural shape. And now we have a field force. Right now the field force is very weak. I'm going to go to 55. Essentially, you're not going to see anything significant until you jump to about 50. So if I play, let's see if we see anything. Okay, there's definitely some movement. It's not really doing, it's hard to tell exactly what it's doing. I can crank up the power a lot more. It doesn't seem to be doing much. Okay, no, I feel like you can see that it's pushing. It does seem to be pushing all of these in, but it's not doing anything as super interesting as I thought it might. I'm also going to make it a little bit stretchy. Like 55 is pretty big for stretchy. So let's just see if that can squeeze stuff in. I mean, okay, obviously different, but yeah, not as kind of crazy as I thought it would be. I want to make sure that these are updating. Why did those get so huge? That's strange. Oh, they're so huge because I made the strength very high. I forget those are a multiplying strength, so don't change the length. Okay, so I just want to see if these are actually updating, which they are, which is good. So you can see that they are moving with the model as it goes. This is a little bit weird, but interesting. So I want to invert those, see if it does anything interesting for us. This is just exploration. When I make those videos, essentially everything I'm doing is this type of thing of like, oh, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I do this? So that's based on the surface. It's not restricting, so it should be inside and outside. I'm going to go to direction and invert the direction. So in theory, all of these are pulling outward, which is just making him stretch outward. So it seems to be behaving more like an ambient overall thing. I thought it might be a really good, like, everything compressed in on itself. It doesn't quite do that, but something to keep in mind. But yeah, that's, anyway, earlier that was the simple inflation and deflation. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Where was that? The radius alone is an amazing feature. Yeah, the new radius is just, I mean, the radius feature inside of the volume, I think, is just a good modeling feature, and it makes things a little bit more blobby. Yeah, Dutch Shane, you should totally watch the streams more often. We're constantly tackling all these weird little workflows. Yep, clean, workable parametric meshes. Yeah, so good. Komodo hype, I like it. Mick has a question. I'm going to see if there's any questions that are specifically pertaining to things we were talking about before I jump back there, but I will. Deflating Cloth. Alex is right. The belt wasn't very strong on the character, so the pants were falling down a bit. Could you use field force to to set the turns of spline and tracer's 90-degree angle to make a network type effect? Well, I'll definitely come back and check that out. Let me just finish reading. Reposting it. Pro Tools. Inflatable Dancer. Jim Carrey's The Mask, yeah. How would you slice a sphere to appear as if it's being 3D printed? That is a interesting question. I don't think there is a good answer to that right now because essentially the 3D print is one continuous movement, and even like my slicer plugin is a series of individual slices. It was kind of, I had it in my head to make some sort of converter that would actually show that stuff off, but I don't have a good solution to that, especially if it was a complex model of some sort. Yeah, display field bug. Did we lose the set initial state for cloth? That is a interesting question. Because you can cache it. No, here's set initial state right there. So I think that we do have it. Let's do a test and see what happens. Let's deflate the character a bit. And now let's see if I can say, oh, it might need to be editable to activate these things. So let's find out. Sadly, making it, it looks like the tag disappeared too. So make that editable, rescue the tag. And now you see that that tab did appear. So it looks like you have to make it editable, unfortunately. But now that that is there, can we let that deflate? Set initial state, go. And now if I rewind, you see it began there. So we do have set initial state. We also have dress state and fixing the points, and I'm not sure what seam polygons means. I'll have to actually look into that. It's a concept that probably ported over from the old cloth, but because the old cloth didn't work well as clothing, I didn't even bother to learn those. But yeah, we got that covered. And somebody asking, who's got like a secret name, can you use Curvature Field on a Voronoi fractured plane to curl the edges only? That's a heck of a question. Curl the edges, curl up the edges only. Okay, I think I follow. Okay, we didn't. We'll have to make it editable. Unfortunately, because when it comes to the actually maybe yeah, we might have to make it editable because we need a vertex map, I think. But anyway, let's do the simplest possible version. So somebody's asking, can we Voronoi fracture something up? And we want to heavily subdivide this thing. So under detailing, I'll say yes, enable detailing. So I think it's very subdivided. But then I'll say, don't worry about any noise. Is there a none? It's funny because I almost never actually use the noise. But anyway, this is just a way of subdividing all of these. And somebody's asking if you can curl these edges out using the new curvature. So let's just talk about the new curvature. I'll make this into a single model by feeding the entire thing into a connect, but don't weld. Very important not to weld here because a lot of points would get welded. But anyway, this just turns that into a nice, simple, singular mesh. Adding in a right-click, other vertex map tag, I can say, hey tag, I want you to use fields. There's a brand new type of field in this version where you drag the exact same model back in again, and then we had points, surface, and volume, but now we have a new curvature. And you'll see curvature is doing a good job of finding the corners. So let's crank that up a little bit. And you see as I do this that the corners are getting selected. And yeah, now that those corners are selected, we can do whatever we want to them. We also tried concave, but that's probably going to be on the interior. But yeah, by clicking on that, we can now see that those are highlighted. What I've been doing, and I did it in the video, was make a second vertex map. In the second vertex map, delete the original, feed in, or I'm sorry, we deleted the mesh. Now we have imported the first vertex map in the second one. If we set that to average, then we can take those points and start blurring them. And you see we can get a nicer fall off as it moves out to other points. And you keep in mind, you can always remap this. So we could make a curve, and based on this curve, I could like fade in a little more softly, or we could crank it up and make it a little more obvious. But anyway, based on all of that, can we now deform that? I wonder if we had to make it parametric. In a second, we'll try doing a non-parametric version, or I'm sorry, a parametric version. So we'll make a plane, and in the plane, it will deform the points. We'll push out on not Y, but Z. Actually, 100 is way too much. Let's do 5. So now you see everything's inflating a little bit. And under the fields, I shall drag the, actually, this is going to have to show the same problem, but I'm going to do this to show you the intentional way to break it. Dragging this in, you're going to see, okay, suddenly all of those corners are the things bulging out, which is cool. But let's see if it happens. If I hit a frame forward, you can see if I hit play, that you see how there's a little bit of motion. Some things are like popping in and out. Everything kind of faded in. What's happening is we built a feedback loop by accident because we're saying, okay, look at the geometry and make a curvature field based on that. Okay, based on the curvature field, deform it. Oh, based on a deformed piece of geometry, what does the curvature look like? And so we got a feedback loop where they loop around again and again and again, and it'll keep on changing. So to get around that, we can make a duplicate of the original object and delete the vertex maps here. So essentially one of these is just a static reference. So in the plane effector, when we drag in this, I'm going to say literally reference the same index, and and tell it to look at this tag from the other model, and it just transfers over. And now if I hit play, it's not going to be like refreshing. So that's showing it via a vertex map. And based on this plane, we could do different effects. Like we could push those out further. We could pull them in a little bit. I mean, and this is a plane, but this could be a lot of different things. We could. It's not maybe the best example, but if I said make a smoothing deformer, and currently everything's getting smooth, I could be like, no, don't smooth everywhere, just smooth the corners. So now only those corners are being affected. So yeah, that adds in some very nice possibilities. Now let's let me see if I can undo. Come on, connect. I could have just done it from scratch. It would have been quicker. And it can't even undo enough. Back and throw that into a fracture. I should have just done that from the beginning. Anyway, detailing, enable, turbulence, 0. Okay, parametric setup here. But can we just throw that into a connect, don't weld, and then make the plane effector be a deformer, and now it's deforming all the points. Push out here, so those will inflate. In the fields, can we directly drag this connect object as a point object and tell it to view it as curvature? Oh, yes, we can, and you see it is working, but remember before I blurred it, and that blurring made it look way better. So we can increase this radius, but it's not going to work quite as nice. But look, it is parametric. We were able to do it parametrically. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, we should keep that in mind. And the curvature, pretty powerful. It's going to open up a lot of cool new opportunities for us. A lot of neat things that we'll be able to bump into for that one. So it's one of those ones that we have to keep in mind as we make things, because you know, it's definitely not something we could have done before. So super duper like that. So thanks for the question there. Welcome, Zach. Rodrigo, thank you very much for the kind words. Trying to cache the state of animation, so you did the cache, you couldn't. Is there a certain way to cache a frame state of calculation? Totorus? Are you referencing, what are you referencing when you're talking about that? Okay, you're talking about the balloon. There may be a bug when it comes to caching some of the cloth stuff right now. I haven't fully investigated, but I've been having trouble with some of the caching. So yeah, there might be an issue with that. Reiko, welcome. First time chatter. Scrolling up a bit, there was a question. Could you use Field Force to turn splines or a tracer to 90-degree angles to create a network type effect? So opening up a link to this network. This is made by Osama Hams, and this is their making of. Fields to, this is making of? Doesn't seem to be showing. Maybe it's not a making of. I don't see any animation. And these 90-degree turns, yeah, I don't think fields are. I don't think the question follows. Yeah, fields have nothing to do with turning a spline in. Maybe you can restate your question in a different way, but I'm just not following the concept. Mick had a question. How would you emulate this trunk knot dipped in resin, placed on a lathe to get the final effect? Okay, I wonder which channel it's going to be, because I watch a lot of these videos. Who is this? I think I've literally watched this video before, because man, it looks really cool. Looks like it's gonna play an ad in a few seconds. So we'll let the ad do its thing, and then we'll pull it back. But anyway, like you can see that there's a block of wood dipped in resin. The wood, you'll see at these different parts that the block of wood, oh come on. Just changing the time made me go to another ad. Let's see if there's a good point where we can see. Yeah, you see how the wood's got like all these pits and everything, which makes it really cool for dipping in resin. So there's a lot going on when it comes to this type of thing. And you're looking for just the final effect, not like an animation to get to that point, which are very different things. A lot of it just has to do with making I think the volume builder would probably do a lot of work for us here. But making a very imperfect model, and then the resin, a lot of the stuff with the resin just goes to material things. And when it goes to that sparkly resin we saw there, Like, there's no way that the material by itself can do that. Materials, for the most part, only do things on the surface of the material, where that means this actually is transparent. There's a lot of things happening on the inside. And that would necessitate cloning a whole bunch of, like, glitter, essentially, to be floating in space. Not impossible. There's always a chance that we horribly crashed the computer by doing some Redshift. And actually, I don't have the new file set up here, so let's see if we can set that to Redshift. And let me double check my render settings to tell Redshift. Yeah, so Redshift has been told not to look at one of my video cards. I'm gonna switch it to the other one because I think I might have crashed on this one. Don't know if it makes a difference, but anyway, this particular scene file should be safe enough. So let's look at this step by step. And by the way, if anybody has any, we're not exclusively focused on 26.1, but I will prioritize questions that are along those lines. But since there were none right now, let us attempt to tackle. So something to think of, I'm trying to think of the way I'd want to do it. I mean, one thing, immediately I want to jump to Ricochet, but essentially you can make any kind of volume that you want. Like, here's here's not using Ricochet, and then I will use Ricochet because I think Ricochet will give us a cool shape. But let's take this shape and decently heavily subdivide it and throw that into a cloner. Tell it to be linear with no spacing. And I don't know, let's make 7 of them. Adding in a random effector. Don't affect position, but yes, rotation, 720 on all of them. So you see I've got this just kind of random layout of stuff going on. Then deform it a whole bunch. Essentially, I just want to turn this into a mess. So throw that into a connect. Don't weld. Plane. Actually, why don't I use a random? Yeah, let's see what happens if I use a random. Random as a deformer. The type will be a noise. And you can see I'm getting kind of like these big warbly movements going. And I push that as far as I want. So, you know, just some kind of crazy randomness there. But then I'm going to add a second one in. And this one, actually, I kind of like the double it up, the layers doubled up there. So let's cut these all to about half. So we get the kind of curvy layers there. And now I'll add a third one in. And this third one is going to be really small. So it's a very small noise on top of it. Actually, no, noise. The scale will be smaller. I want to make it spikier, so I'm going to change this to be pure random, and now every single point is randomly moving. So you can see, essentially, I just made some very messy geometry. This was like my intent here. I don't know, maybe we don't need to use Ricochet, because that's looking a little bit better than I thought it would. So that's just some crazy, messy geometry. Based on that, let's feed that, and this can go inside. Based on this messy geometry, we'll throw that into the volume builder, volume mesher, and I'm gonna make it, you know, decently high resolution. Okay, maybe not quite that high. And you'll see we get some nice messy geometry everywhere. It looks kind of cool, almost like a big old splash. But right now it's pretty much infinitely thin. But if we add a dilate and a road, then we can inflate it, and each of these will be kind of treated like almost like a sheet of paper. And we don't have to go too far, but each of these are going to start getting a little bit of a volume, and we want a volume. And this is where, now that we've done this, they all blob together, so it doesn't matter that they were intersecting, and it's just working pretty well. Let's push it further. It's working pretty well. I'm going to double the point count here, which should like double up how messed up the surface can be. And that final random, I'll push that 3 times further. Each time the volume is trying to calculate. So anyway, I'm trying to, like, these little smaller details, I'm trying to exaggerate those. Yeah, you can now see that those are decently exaggerated. And, you know, and we can even, like, repeat this process. Now we've got this big blob where each of these is filling up the shape. But is that a good idea? Probably. Maybe. Let's push it where I'm going to take that volume mesher and duplicate that final random. So now I'm taking this geometry and exploding it out to some, you know, to have some extra detail. Let's see, I want to make it semi-reasonable. So now you can see I'm getting a real mess here. After that, let's make a smoothing. And let's smooth it after we do that random, but not too much. So let's say 0 stiffness and only, what, like 2 iterations? Maybe 3 or 4. Yeah, just get a little coherence back. So you can see we're kind of messing up the surface even more. And then I'll duplicate the entire setup. Delete, delete, and now feed the volume, the deformed volume into a brand new volume builder to turn it into a blob again, turn it into a mesh again, and now we get an even more messed up surface. But anyway, you can see how I'm just like having fun and layering things up. Now there should be, it's a little thicker. It's a little more blobbed than I want it to be. So I'm going to go easy on this inflation. Let's see if I get rid of all the inflation. How well is it? I really want to get like internal structure. And it seemed like we were losing the internal structure. There seems to be some, maybe not as much as I want. Let's just, let's go slow, find out what we get. This might actually be encapsulating the volumes in a way that is not exactly what I want. But anyway, let's what I was going to say is, like, if you were saying like, oh, this is getting lathed into some sort of shape, let's just, draw a lathe, spline. So spline tool, and actually I think I want this one. It's really hard to tell some of these icons before you know it. Draw and edit, spline vertex drawing. I think it's this one. So let's just draw out. Oop. That is not it. This is the one, I suppose. Oh, I click and hold, and then we get sketch. Okay, I thought I was looking at that and that, but we were actually looking at the polygon pen and the spline pen. Spline pen is what I wanted. So essentially we need a point in the beginning, point at the end, and then we can draw out whatever kind of crazy vase shape that we want. And we can go small detail, large detail, like that can even go way in. Yeah, I'm making a completely random shape right now. The one thing you probably want to do is make sure that, I'll do it individually, make sure that this point is, select just that one model, select just the point, and set that point to 0 on X, and select this point to 0 on X. So those are zeroed out. And now we got a shape in which we can lathe. Feed that through. Come on. Lathe. So now that spins around, you see we get this, crazy piece of pottery. I'd probably want to spin that around. Might as well get that vertical. So not exactly sure what it is, but there you go. In our final volume, maybe. Yeah, I'm going to say in our final volume. Ooh, I got to say something about the setup. Like my mouse is being like, oh, slow. Drop that inside of our volume builder. And now I'm going to say only show. Whoa. I want to see only where those things are intersecting each other. So yeah, actually that's working okay. I mean, essentially it's taking too many bites out, but much in the way we saw the wood, you can see that we get that final shape, which looks good, and we get these little bites taken out of it. So we get this interior dimension. So that's where a lot of the magic of that setup is going to be. Now, I bet you we might be able to get more detail by putting less in the count, because I think a lot of them are intersecting, creating sealed off volumes, and those sealed off volumes, yeah, by decreasing it, we're going to actually get more missing chunks. I'm not sure how far down to go, but I'll say 3. Yeah, so there we go. This is like a nice amount of missing detail. Now we could do more and more and more and more and mess things up. If I crank up the resolution of these volume meshers, like that would be improving the quality of that. A lot of things to do along those lines. Now when it comes to the volume, we will see the faceting of this a little bit. It'll be hard to tell because it's decent, but you see there's like the Fong highlight right there. And it's because the volume has a higher resolution than our lathe. So in the lathe, here's the subdivision count. I'm going to jump that up to 124. And maybe even this one can jump up to at least double. So that should smooth that out a bit. And now we end up with this as essentially the final mesh. I'm pretty sure that we could just pull out the lathe. And now we've got one model. I probably want to shrink it a little bit. So, okay, what am I trying to say? I think I'm trying to say that when it comes to the resin part of this, I'm not going to worry about perfectly inverting these two things, although in reality they don't overlap, but because I think we can just make them overlap. But I think I do want to copy this and steal the volume. So I will put this lathe into a volume, and I'm only doing that because I want to deflate it just a tiny little bit. I mean, there's different things we can do for that, but I think this will work fine. So this lathe is now its standalone model. And in the volume builder, I'll say I want a dilate and erode, and that will inflate it. But I'm going to say actually minus point, I don't know, 2. And let's see how close that is to working. Is it? Yeah, I think it's working pretty well. Maybe it'll sneak through in a couple places. Maybe this was not the right way to do it. I don't know. We'll find out. Let's save the file before we move into the dangerous rendering part of it. Lathe resin. That's fine. Lathe resin. Okay. Now, just for a little visual clarity, if I change this to automatic and we change that, you can see how we've got these two different shapes and each are kind of showing up in slightly different spots. Now, when it comes to the wood, well, it's going to get dangerous now because we're going to go into rendering. Now, something that's good. How do I want to do this? Let's rename this one to wood. Rename this one to resin. We're not worried about the resin at all. I'll just turn that one off entirely for now. Let's see. Well, let's just do this as we go step by step. I'm going to open up Redshift, or let's start Redshift rendering. Turn that off. Turn this on. Might even, I mean, that's going to refresh pretty well, but I'll tell this to not work quite as hard. Let's see if we can put up to 1. So, you know, hopefully that that's a little calmer. And we want to make some material. Well, let's illuminate the entire thing, and we can show off some of the new HDRs, which are super cool. Opening up a Redshift dome light. You know, everything's over, you know, is illuminated via just white, but Maxon has added in some new assets that they gathered from other artists. And in this case, I think they're available for everybody. Or I think you need to have a subscription service to get access to the asset browser constantly updating. So just keep that in mind. But under textures, there's now an HDR folder. And inside there are the old legacy ones. But now there is also these. And I know I said that. Oh, that's weird. I'd already downloaded 1 or 2 of these, and now they're saying they're not downloaded. Well, I'll start one of them downloading. They're like 300 megs. This one's 400 megs. These are supposed to be 16K, so these are like really high quality HDRs. But it's kind of, you know, it's nice having high quality stuff like that in cinema. And while we're talking about it, there's also this new imperfections folder. So we got all these gorgeous imperfection maps at 4K resolution. So we'll probably end up using these in a lot of our scene files as well. And there's also a series of Redshift materials. There's not too many of them, but I forget where those are hiding as well. Under materials, Redshift. Now, here's something I didn't know. If I click on the Redshift folder, we're going to get all these subfolders. But if you middle mouse button click on like any folder, it'll actually show you the contents of all of the folders. That's a pretty cool addition. But anyway, yeah, there's these Redshift materials, but those won't help us now. There are a couple different types of wood, but they won't help us here. Well, anyway, we've got an HDR loaded in. Under Object, I'll drag that HDR. And I find this one, or at least in Redshift, I find a couple of these to be a little bit dim. So I've been like pushing this up to like 2 or 3. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I'm going to overcrank that to get a little bit more illumination going. But you see like already like the really high resolution of that, which is pretty cool. Anyway, now we've got a little bit of illumination to see what we're doing here. So we're going to spend a bunch of time. I don't know how far we'll push this because I have spent hours and hours and hours doing this type of thing. Anyway, we haven't crashed yet. Let's save it. Open up our materials and say, I want a new Redshift material standard material. With the standard material, we'll apply it to the wood. It's currently UV mapping, which I think is fine because we're going to use 3-dimensional noises. So far, not too much is happening. Let's zoom up like a more specific part, which should, you know, communicate pretty well what we're looking at. Okay. Inside of our material, by the way, here's a little change. Apparently this was a major request because the way old nodes for Redshift worked, if you clicked one time, you would get this menu, like kind of everything laid up vertically. So now if you double click, it will pop open the node editor right away, which is nice. So here's our standard material. We are going to be spending some time I'll just immediately search for a color layer because we're going to be layering up a bunch of what they, for some reason, is called Maxon noises. If I search for the word noise, we've got Maxon noise, and this is all of our wonderful noise types inside of Cinema. What I want to prove right away, let's feed that out to the surface. I want to prove that to myself that this is indeed a three-dimensional noise. If we go to the, I think, input, we get all these input scales. So we have X, Y, and Z, and I'm not sure if this is X or Y, but if we, is this one of those situations where the number, when the number gets bigger, it actually gets smaller? Let's find out. Nope, it actually does get bigger. So here, it's already good. You can see that this is indeed a three-dimensional noise. What's cool about this is if we had a wood grain, that wood grain shouldn't be traveling around the surface. It's more like that wood grain exists in three-dimensional space. We just happen to chip away at a piece of wood. And, you know, let me show you. If I were to make a smaller noise here, and this one can probably even get stretched, we should see, unfortunately, yeah, you can now see that. Okay, I went too small on that. Let's say 0.5, 0.5. Nope, 0.5 again. By having these larger numbers, do you see how like I get like this stripe traveling? But if we look at it on a different orientation, if we look at it kind of dead on here, you see how we kind of get these spots. But if we look at it from the top, you're going to get these stripes. It's as if these lines are existing. Well, these lines are existing in three-dimensional space, and we just happen to get a cross section of it. And that's exactly what we want to happen. I would love to rotate this noise overall. I'm not entirely sure how to do that. I wonder if we can set that to cubic. And if we do set it to cubic, does it visually still kind of look the same way? And my main point is, can I now rotate it to some like arbitrary angle? And will this now have those lines at some arbitrary angle, or, you know, 45? Doesn't seem to be. It seems like the three-dimensional noise is like, nope, I am at this angle. It is what it is. There are usually, or at least in regular cinema, there is the world space. Yeah, so we got the source based on the current objects, but it could be based on the world or the vertex map. I could rotate the axis of this object, and it would rotate. I'm just not going to worry about it. It would have been neat if it did work, but it didn't, so I'm not going to worry about that. Anyway, UV mapping. So without spending too much time, because like seriously, we could spend hours trying to design like a really high quality parametric noise, and you know, believe me, I would enjoy it. But let's, okay, we're gonna get, sorry, when you have your third-party renderer, you're almost always wanting to have it on a second monitor, and of course, I don't have that luxury while on the live stream, so we're gonna be fighting for space here. Trying to find an angle that kind of gives us a little bit of all the information. Actually, this seems pretty good. So now you can see right here, we're seeing the long line, we're kind of seeing the soft one, and we're seeing an area with lots of detail. So essentially, it's a little bit of everything. So I'll try and have that up in this corner. We'll try and work from, I don't know, around here. Of course, we'll have to have our parameters, but whatever. So to begin with, I feel like that scale's okay. I might want to, I'm gonna make it larger. As we layer things, they'll layer up more. But I'm gonna make it really stretched out. So now we're in the Perlin noise, which is the simplest noise. So changing that noise type to Luca. Luca is a very nice input to make wood. Look at all this instant detail we're getting from just that one noise. Like, very cool. Let's drag that as our, I'll actually make a duplicate of that. So this one, I'll say that this one will be, actually we'll make it not Perlin, but one of the simpler ones. Maybe displaced turbulence. Turbulence is good. Wavy turbulence is really nice. Typically I wouldn't be using for something like wood, but yeah, you see, actually, yeah, it's pretty good here. So you see we get that looking pretty nice, but what I would like is this one to be larger. So I'm going to go 3 times the scale, which essentially is going to make it look a little less detailed. And that's going to be the base of our wood. That is interesting. I'm going to have to do a request to Maxon, because when I click this dot, they change some things when it comes to these nodes. When I click this dot, I want to drag out a new wire, but instead it's trying to tear off the existing wire, which would be great if I'm clicking on the wire, but I'm clicking on the dot. Oh, by the way, you can hold down control now and add in these extra points for splitting off detail. And actually, while I'm doing that, if I click on this output, I can now output that to be the base. So you can see how that can like branch out to different spots. So that's pretty cool. But in any case, that will output to the base color. This will go straight out to surface. And let's add in Luca as a layer 1. Now this layer is, we've got the base layer, and now our second layer, which is layer 1, should, let's try overlay. So now these two should combine. And the idea here, yeah, so this was perfect, exactly what I wanted. We're getting Luca everywhere, but now certain areas are dark and certain areas are light. And honestly, we're kind of already there as far as I want to get with the wood. Oops, don't just select one. Copy. Let me hit save. Everything's working so far as the stream is concerned. Let's drag in. Oh, I just want to output this one. Like, you know, it's always good to look at, you know, them one at a time. Now, we could just do another Luca. Not even necessarily a bad idea. If I just take the same Luca and I make it, say, 5 times the scale, then we're going to get a large one. But Luca is very detailed. But you see how we get, like, more variation. So it's like, okay, that could just be a cool thing to overlay again. So let's drag that in, output the color layer again. And now we've activated layer 2. And I'd like to also overlay that one, but you could be combining, you know, so now we're getting this really heavy contrast. But this, you know, first of all, we could pull back on the blending, the mask. But we could also do things like exclude or dodge. Like dodge might be nice here. And then, you know, when I'm building this type of stuff, I would just be playing around and combining and seeing what I end up with. Yeah, those are going to be a little extreme in this case, but maybe a soft light, that's usually a subtler combination. But, you know, overlay, I know what it does, and it's probably a good one. So anyway, we're getting, let's not overlay quite as much. And so we got this nice variety of wood. I'm not going to push that any further for now. I mean, actually, that's not true. I'm lying because I'm going to make one more. I'll copy this Luca one more time. And the reason for that is one thing I love doing is making a super tiny one. Let's see, is there a way of dragging out a second wire from there? No, I gotta talk to Maxon about that because this point, when I click on this dot, I want a new wire to drag out, which is not what's currently happening. Anyway, I'll do it from the other direction. That should force it. Okay, so now we're just seeing this one. Something I love doing, and I'm going to make this really long and stretched out in one orientation, so super stretched, which won't look very different here. Yeah, barely different. But I'm then going to take the overall scale and go to something pretty small. Let's do 0.1. I'll probably go even smaller. But what I want is, yeah, there we go. Like these tiny, tiny little micro lines, like very, very small. So let's output all of them combining now. Inside of this final layer, I'll activate that. And currently it's set to normal, so I think it's just going to completely override it. So instead of doing some sort of overlay, I'm just going to set this to 0.1 maybe. So now there's a 0.1 of this super micro detail. And it's going to be hard to tell here, but when you zoom up, or if this is driving a bump map, it will catch like those little glints of light, even if we're only seeing 0.1 of it. I mean, and you can push it further. I can say 0.25, and you got to watch in that exact frame where it transitions. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to tell. But yeah, you see a little bit of that pop in. I kind of like the 0.2. It's definitely bringing out the detail a little bit. Keep in mind, it softened everything else up. But anyway, that is now feeding through this layer, combining all of those in different ways. So, next up, I would probably just make a ramp. The simplest version here. Let's make a ramp. Feed this into input, alt input. I've always found that a very strange name, that this is the alternative input. Like you would think that would be source. So anyway, I don't like the name of that, but that's just me. Output that as our final surface. And we need to colorize this. Now, something I highly recommend, and actually, you know, just because we have it, let's just use our reference. When you're pulling out colors for this type of thing, what is in your head and what's real are very different. This tree is actually decently yellow, but in my head, trees are very brown. But in reality, when you look at a tree trunk, it's very gray. There's barely any color inside of it. But, okay, I am going to pick the colors, but I'm going to have to do it off the screen. Let me show you. I'm going to be clicking on a knot, clicking on this, and then clicking on different parts of that tree, but I don't want to... I don't want to rearrange cinema in a way that it could get upset. We're already kind of in the danger zone. So I'm going to begin. You don't need to stay that way, but I'm going to begin with the lightest color. And I'm just going to keep on eyedropping a couple of times, working my way to different colors, going from the ones that I can see that are lightest and working my way up to, and that one wasn't very strong, so I'll push it a little further, a little darker. And now I'm going to start looking for areas that are actively decently dark. That was maybe a little too much of a jump, but we can always find in-betweens. And this area is pretty dark. Those are almost identical though. It's hard to tell. And I'm going to click on like one of the darkest areas on it. So that's kind of giving me a spectrum of these. I think that these are a little similar. You see this one's a little more desaturated, but let's pull that over and pull this over. So yeah, that's just kind of getting a nice colorizing on there. You can already see this getting applied. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to apply the colors in such a linear way, like rearranging some of these. Like, it can go, you can get some interesting looks by pushing things a little bit further. And, you know, don't be shy to like slightly modify it, like lightening that up and pulling the gray down to get a little contrast. You can see it gets lighter, gets darker, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. And then you can see how it modifies everything. Now, this is getting mapped onto a particular color scheme. You can see right now that this is a pretty harsh transition. So once again, I'm making this up. If we were building a rig, we could like push things a little bit more carefully. But I think that we just need more range for these dark colors to that's pretty rough. I'm gonna get rid of one of these. Let's have a subtler transition between those two. Better. Pull that darker, or pull this over so the darks get more of the overall range. Yeah, yes and no. Okay, so I have an idea of, I haven't done this in a long time, but we can see the result that we're getting from here. And it's not bad, but what I'm thinking might be a good idea. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to, let's take this. Okay, those connections are annoying me. Come on, connect. Come on, come on. Instead of colorizing the final output from that entire thing, I'm going to interject this at an earlier step and have the base color coming in, and then we have a bunch of overlays that are coming in after the fact. So we have a base color that's going to then get lightened and darkened by everything else. So I have had we can recolorize this. Let me see if I can. Is there a way of distribute knots? Now those are all even, which should be better. And this final noise, yeah, that's better. And this final noise, which we told to do a it's just normal one, we could say actually you are an overlay, so that is going to lighten and darken like little micro areas. So yeah, that already looks better, colorizing this thing and modifying it a little bit after the fact. Now you can colorize these individual noises. So like this noise right here, currently it's going from white or black to white, but I could say, you know what, don't go quite to white. Let's go and give it a hint of orange. And that hint of orange is probably gonna make everything like significantly more orange in these light areas. Oh, I have to click off this for that to acknowledge. Yeah, see, look how much more that made that orange. So yeah, we have a lot of ability to layer and layer and layer and layer. And even here, like a lot of these overlays are very strong. So maybe I'll pull back. You know, be like, okay, you're like, yes, you're dark, but you're not that dark. Let's see what that does. Because I'd love not to be hitting quite these peaks. Maybe it already refreshed. But let me just pull some of these darkest areas to be not quite as dark. Anyway, we could go further and further and further. One thing I do suggest is a color correct once you've kind of built it. Now, this should be a last step. I would have spent normally a lot more time on that one. But feeding this through a color correct, adding in like little gamma modifications, and then a final like hue shift or saturation scale. Like if this isn't saturated enough, we say, okay, 1.5. And instead of like worrying about changing the colors on everything, you see the entire thing has gotten more saturated. So maybe 1.1. And then on the gamma, let's say 1.2, and brighten up the gamma everywhere. But also potentially you can make it darker. You can increase the contrast. But yeah, see all the wood has gotten lighter or darker. We also say the entire thing should be darker. I'm going to overboard 0.5. And yeah, so everything gets super duper dark. And keep in mind, we could like re-feed this back in and start combining things in another color layer. Like things get super crazy. But I'll brighten up the gamma a little bit. I'll increase the contrast a bit. Actually, contrast going down might be a good idea. But let's see what happens if I drop that down a bit. No, we'll increase it just a bit. Okay, that's enough for me for now. Like I said, I would love to keep on going on that, but enough is enough for that for now. Okay, so all of that ends up being just our color for our basic material. So now we're back on the basic material. Oren-Nair is good. I'm going to give the diffuse roughness. It's going to be quite rough overall. It's not metallic at all. And then I think it's going to be actually quite blurry. I'm trying to get a vibe for this before we put the color in. Actually, the wood is going to be very rough. Like, it's essentially not reflective. I mean, you know, it's kind of reflecting light, but it's not reflective. This isn't refreshing as... Maybe it is. Is that refreshing super quick for me, or is it not? Because I kind of feel like it's saying Redshift material not valid. We haven't done anything to it. Why wouldn't that be valid? Let's just try starting it over. Okay, I don't know what it didn't like. Anyway, you can see I'm making it nice and blurry, still catching a couple highlights. I'm looking at the reference. The reference has essentially no highlights. It's so diffuse. And it would probably be a good idea, although I probably won't here. You know, we could spend forever on this. It would probably be a good idea to do a little bit of subsurface scattering, because, you know, wood does have light penetrate in a little bit. But plugging the color channel into the Redshift material color, and instantly, okay, that's looking pretty good. I am pleased with that. It's looking nice. I'm pretty sure, I know we started doing the colorizing beforehand, but I think it's relatively safe to just make a bump map here. So let's say bump map, and we'll just feed the exact same thing through. Texture input output to the bump channel. It's very nice that the Redshift material shows like all the very main ones. Pretty much, you know, I feel like a vast majority of the time it is properly giving me the ones that I wanted it to. Let's see how we're doing there. Hard to tell. I mean, it seems like the bump is pretty subtle. Something that might be a good idea. It would be breaking. Oh, that's weird. It broke the wrong connection. I'm going to put the bump on it with no color, so we should be able to just kind of visualize the bump. Keep in mind, I left the... We're not doing bucket rendering here. Just, of course, we're rendering while live streaming, so we got to be cautious on that. So letting that resolve just a little bit. Yeah, we can definitely see there is bump going through. And I don't want to go overboard on the bump, but because it is rough wood, we can easily like double this. So I'll say double that. And we can invert it. And it would probably be a good idea to like make a duplicate of these noises or put an additional noise so that's not, you know, all of these lines shouldn't be perfectly correlating with the colors. So having a little variation between them is a good idea. I'm not going to worry about that. But yeah, a variant of this color using all the same shaders, but maybe some stronger, some weaker, overlaid in different ways, could give you a better bump. But anyway, you know, a little bit of imperfection on there, pretty cool. Add that back into the color. Unless we're doing the subsurface scattering, which we're not going to do here, I don't think that we need to push that any further than we did. And we get a nice three-dimensional noise traveling through the entire thing. Save that, and let's just look at this a little bit further away. Maybe from a different angle. This area is nice and messed up. See what we get. So yeah, a nice big piece of messed up wood. Like I said, I would have liked to have rotated this a little bit differently. Maybe all of our noises could have been vertical. And this is, well, this is on, yeah, this is on the wood. Maybe I can just rotate this axis. What would happen if I do? Set this to axis mode. And I'm not sure which one is going to rotate on two of them, which should give us pretty good odds. Oh, go to object axis, 90, 90. Let's see if that does trick it. Oh, it, why did axis turn off? I might have done something wrong, but model axis 90, 90. I would have thought that would have done something different, but again, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, so that's all good. Save it again because it's still working. Let's move on to our resin, reactivate this, and now we're going to see that this is where all the resin would end up in the end. So we just need a resin material. Just need a resin material. So Redshift material standard, and this one will be wood. This one will be a resin. Dropping the resin on the resin. I'm going to be a little fuzzy on this. Did I make any of my own personal presets that could help? Resin. I have glass, jade, plastic. I guess let's do it from scratch. How do we... I'm going to do this wrong. And if anybody, especially Zach, if you know what I'm doing wrong, feel free to shout out. But what I want to do is essentially make it completely transparent, and then the only thing we're seeing as far as surface is concerned will be via subsurface scattering. So I think I want to crank my transmission up all the way, which means it's now 100% transparent, refractive. So let's see what we end up with. Yes, no? That took a while to wake up, but it is processing through. I really don't need those icons refreshing. I wonder if that is slowing us down as we go. Control E, Redshift, preview materials when renderer is idle. Hopefully that works. Anyway, you can now see that we got this nice transparency going through, and it seems to be doing a fine job where you can see it's like it just kind of terminates where the wood is. So, you know, pleased with that. It's rough reflections right now, so I'm going to pull back on the roughness. That part should be super shiny. Actually, I guess when the lathe is all said and done, it's almost like the stuff that's on the outer part we would want to be shiny and polished in the end, and the stuff on the interior we would want to be rougher. But, you know, let's not worry about that. So nice and shiny resin. Can we very simply get some color going here? Let's just see if I can make it. Well, I'm gonna put a color in there just because it, you know, it makes it really blatant. So, you know, really strong color, and can I set that down to 0.1? Will we see a effect? No. Dang it! I feel like I'm gonna mess something up here. I'm gonna keep an eye on the chat in case Zach is like, do this. But yeah, I've done this before. I just can't remember. But like, I feel like that should have shown something there. So it's like, oh, is it supposed to be no transparency? But I feel like I would want some transparency. So yeah, clearly some color is going through there. But then if I say the weight, if the weight is 1, I would think that'd be more transparent. Use a, if I just want to change the color, use the scatter color and depth slider under transmission. Okay, maybe you're right. So I'm going to get rid of that transmission, and now there's a depth and a scatter color. So again, let's just make it green. And what does scatter color do? Right now, this might not show anything because we have no depth. So let's give it a second. It should become totally transparent again. Okay, cool. And now if we put a depth in there, and I'm not sure how large this object is, but let's say 1. Okay, that became quite opaque. And my assumption would be larger numbers will be more transparent. That is very overwhelming, but that could be because I made that so saturated. Yeah, maybe. You can see we're seeing a little bit there. I'm going to keep on pushing the depth further, which hopefully continues to make it transparent. Essentially, my thought is, yeah, okay, I was right. That is how, well, first of all, Zach, thank you. I figured you'd be able to jump in to the rescue on that one. Essentially, it's like, how far do we have to look through? How thick does the material have to be until it looks like a solid color of that? And if we say 1, it's very opaque. And now I'm saying it's very, you know, it's just barely tinted. Now, I gotta say for myself, when it comes to resin, I like when the resin is very transparent. I like being able to see through a lot of it. It always gets frustrating to me when I watch a lot of the lathe videos where they do cool resin stuff and they make it so opaque. It's like, but one of the special properties here is you're working with a material that can be very transparent. So let's make something a little bit in the purple, blue purple range. But I'm gonna make it very light. And then we did add a little darkness in here, which is fine. And I might double up the depth again. So we're just kind of get something a little bit milky looking. Yeah. Okay, so we get something a little bit milky looking. Here's, okay, so essentially that is the meat of the material stuff. But when it comes to actually it's looking pretty nice. I wish I'd made a better base shape. Actually, what's funny is we can easily change that shape because everything we have is parametric. So if I changed this, we could get a very different looking layout very easily. But in any case, let's temporarily stop rendering because we need to do some fancier, we need to build a little bit of a rig here. I think, what's going to be the best way? There's a lot of geometry. It's going to be very difficult to do this. Let me think. We'll just keep on baking it down. Maybe it won't be so bad. I don't know. Save again. Looking good. I'm going to copy out this lathe and let's temporarily hide these. So you can see we've got this lathe, and this is reasonable-ish as far as geometry is concerned. Although I'm going to make it even lower just to make it go quicker. Yeah. And yeah, that's fine. So I want a piece of glitter. So we want a single polygon. So 1 by 1 plane. And it's going to be real tiny. I don't know how small. So let's just shrink and then shrink and shrink. So that is, yeah, maybe something around there. We can make it bigger, we can make it smaller, but that's fine for now. So, couple of options. Honestly, the first and kind of only thing that jumps to mind, the main thing that jumps to mind would be we just have to make a big old clone of these. Now, can we... I can say the form, it's going to fill a form, and the form could be an object. And can the object be this slightly lower poly lathe? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Now, I want this cloner to not be any larger than it needs to be. And vertically, no larger than it needs to be. In fact, I mean, I'm going to be randomizing. It's fine. We'll do that. So, are those appearing only in the interior? I don't know. So let's keep on increasing the amount. 11 by 11 by 11. They're really small. So I'll increase. Now, right now, I'm only seeing one. So maybe this custom shape is not working. If I say cubic, you see we got a whole bunch of them. If I say object, I'm only seeing the one. So I don't trust that. So, we're going back to cubic. And 55 by 55. Yeah, this is going to get nuts. Oh, dang. I'm still on per step. Let me hit undo a few times. That was my mistake. That was my mistake. Okay, so what did I do wrong? Turn off the axes, and there we go. So I have to scale these back down again. Zoop. Okay. Okay. So here's my mistake. I accidentally had this on per step where I really wanted endpoint. So now that that's happening, is this actually filling the volume? And yes, it is. Okay, cool. That's going to help us a little bit. So now I can start increasing this. And you see that those will begin filling. I don't know how far we can go until we're going to get like real bad slowdown. But when we do, we'll bake it down. Yeah, so that's now a lot. I don't think we can make a multi... I'm going to make it editable. I'm a little worried about making a multi-instance. Because it'll run really quick once we bake it down. Anyway, random. And we do need some random position. And they are going to escape out of the model. So that's going to cause us a little bit of trouble. Definitely want some rotation. So those will all rotate there. I'll randomly scale. I'm going to give it I don't guess it doesn't have to be an absolute scale. So we'll say they can all scale 0.5 from each other. And now I did make it bigger so we could see it. So now I'm going to set these to be smaller, 0.5 maybe. About a fourth of the size. It's refreshing. Hopefully. Hopefully. Typographer saying, and then animate the lathe spline. That's an appropriate emoji for the emotion. Come on, wake up. Oh, it did wake up. It was taking both of them, but it did go. Okay, cool. Pretty much exactly what I wanted. I imagine some of these are actually escaping our shape. So if I turn on the shape, yeah, they totally are because of our random. So unfortunately, we are forced to delete everything outside the shape, and they're running so slow. I need to turn it off, make a duplicate of the cloner. It's even trying to wake up just from turning it off. I probably went too far. Yeah, I definitely went too far. I'm going to clone I'm gonna make it there be like not nearly as many because we can fake it and make more once because it's a lathe, we can like fake things pretty well. So we're gonna go way fewer. So that's way, way, way fewer. But I was gonna duplicate that and make some larger ones just so I can tell. Activate, and it's gonna run quicker. So you can see a bunch of these are escaped. So I just want to make the rig where the plane, this plane effector will not affect the position, but it will scale them to a uniform absolute -1, which makes them scale down to nothing. I'm gonna say yes, but you only scale down to nothing if you are seeing the lathe volume. And I think now everything inside of it's scaling down to nothing. So I will invert. And yeah, now you see a couple on the corner that are slightly poking through. So even that is implying that we should make sure that our lathe is slightly tinier, which we can do parametrically with a, let's just, I think it's, because it's a volume, we should be able to just do an extrude node. So here's an extrude capsule, and it will use islands, and it will offset -1. If I turn it on, okay, no, we have to go +1. That lathe might be inside out. But yeah, you can see that shrinking down, although it doesn't seem to be acknowledging that deformed version. So I'll put this into a connect, don't weld, plane. You should be viewing the modified version. There, a couple more disappeared. And once I shrink these back down again, that should be fine. You know what, we might get a couple little pieces of glitter sneaking through. I'm not gonna stress out over it. So that should now scale down all of our escapees to nothing, reactivating the actual glitter, hiding this one. Now we can see we've got a decent collection of glitter all piled up. I don't want to lose the rig, so let's just temporarily turn that off, make this copy editable, and now that can be fed into a connect. Don't weld, bake that down, and now we just have a model. This model is now incredibly fast to run. Making a new cloner, I will clone that glitter in a radial with 0 radius, and now because we have that glitter essentially repeating, but it's so random it's gonna be like impossible to tell. If I make enough of them, we might be able to see it, but now you can see I can make tons of it. Look how much of this I can now make. Now you see, as I get to these higher numbers, you start seeing a pattern where it's repeating a little bit. So essentially you want to avoid going so far that the pattern emerges. And you could, actually I will do something here. Let's go to this random and give it a different seed. And then make a duplicate of our cloner, reactivate it. And as soon as that's reactivated, hard to tell, make that editable and put that into a connect object. Don't weld, bake that down. Now I have a secondary one with completely different random glitter. I can put that into the cloner, and now I've got double the variation in there. So now I bet we can push that even further without seeing the pattern, and which we can. So yeah, now we have a ton of geometry glitter. If we zoom up, like, yeah, we're now in a world of glitter. And because we baked it down, it can run incredibly quickly. So material-wise, this is a really straightforward one. Let's make a Redshift standard material glitter. Inside glitter, I'll just crank the metalness all the way. And I mean, if it's supposed to be a little bit rough, then we can make it rough. If not, then we can, we can make it super shiny. We can make it a little bit rough. I'm going to leave it kind of default there. So that is the glitter. That gets dropped onto the one thing that's actually showing off the glitter. Glitter geo. Glitter raw. This will be plane.scale. And this random is .psr. Actually, now it's PRS. PRS. They changed that in 26. Okay. All of that's all good. We should have some super crazy glitter. Let's move up pretty close. This should never render, but now let's reactivate our wood and resin and zoom up somewhere so we can actually see it. Like, okay, so how much does it actually feel like it's filling up the space? not terrible. And you can see it's a little bit further away from the surface than I wanted it to be. So it's a little bit more interior. So that offset I did might have been a little extreme. But anyway, that should give us some stuff going on in the interior. So let's get something kind of framed up a little bit. And let's reactivate our render and see if it can see it. I'm excited. Come on, Redshift. You can do it. Check in the chat. Check in the chat. Thanks, Tobias, for linking to the Rocket Lasso community link where you can come and join our Slack channel. I'll put that in the YouTube as well. Oh, it's starting to render. Oh, look at this crazy refraction going on there. Let's let that refresh a little bit more. And all of it should be away from the surface decently, so I guess that's just the refraction. We should, probably be smart to look up a little bit of the index of refraction of different resin types. Resolving a little bit more, but I guess that might make sense if the resin's in the right spot. Now, when it comes to like different types of glitter, if you actually really, first of all, we could do some of the glittery type effect on the surface, which we have the settings where it's almost like making a car paint type situation. Probably be good to do that as well. In this case, I feel like it being a little more opaque could be nice. I do feel like I want, well, first of all, it's like even with the glitter as it is, I kind of feel like I want 10 times as much of it, which we could do. But I also would kind of like the glitter to be like half its size, double the amount, to fill it out more. But essentially you get the point. We have to physically make the glitter to actually have it be in the interior to actually refract properly. I'll turn on the bucket render, although this could be like ridiculously slow to process. I do have everything set to default except for the overall, I forget what the parameter is called, the progressive, the 0.001 went to 1, so maybe it's not going to be very high resolution. And also the resolution of the screen is kind of crazy, so it's hard to tell if it's doing something. Are you doing something, Redshift? Maybe. Anyway, check in the chat. Is there anything else to cover? We've got another 20 minutes. This was a fun one to tackle. I like this type of thing. Yeah, reticulation in crystals. That could be the case. A low quality fog. Is that, could that be a thing? Typographer is saying a low quality fog that has noise masquerading as glitter. Not something I really know about, but I could see that potentially working. Also keep in mind we have only half my render power. Oh, look at the irradiance cloud is only at 6%, so that's this is a beefy render. I mean, keep in mind that how many polygons are like making up this overall shape. I was going to put it into a remesh, but because we're just letting these two meshes like ram into each other, like the remesh could put the polygons in different spots, giving us like weird air breaks and bubbles and whatnot. Yeah, this is going to take too long to render at the current setting, so I'm just going to kill that off. Let's look at the entire thing overall a little bit, and maybe I'll make it a little more opaque, and then we might see the repetition, but I'm going to like put way more glitter in there, so almost double the glitter. And I wonder, we're gonna see the repetition, but if we put a random, stop rendering for a second. If I, well, first of all, it being in this shape is going to be a lot harder to see the repetition. But just as a thought, we can't scale it all. We can't rotate it all. But if we did put a random effector on that and we just spin it, like that should work. Yeah, so if I spin these around, then now they're not in such a perfect pattern. So some might be like butted up against each other, but other ones will be moved away. Yeah, it's, as soon as you make that editable, it's so like quick to go. But you can see, okay, look here, you see it like same. So by having the same one, we definitely get that patterning. And then if any one of them just happens to be in that perfect spot, it's going to happen. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but I'm going to make a copy of that, turn that off. Let's put this cloner into, this actually will be fun. Let's put that cloner into a connect object. Don't weld and bake that down. So now we've got a single model of all of those, And because it's been baked down, if we put a plane as a deformer inside of it, those are all now getting deformed. And if we say, okay, yeah, you're all getting deformed, but only by like 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Actually, that shouldn't have been a plane. It should have been a random deformer. And I expect to see this explode. Yep. Pretty much what I want it to do, though. And say 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. And I'll tell this to, yeah, it's fully random right now. And 0.2 might be way too much. But now all of those are individually getting deformed. Although, how did those escape? Is the random so strong it could make those escape? I thought everything was like floating super on the inside. No, I'm not sure. Turn off the random for a second. I just want to see. I guess that doesn't seem right. I mean, I'm deforming the points, yes, but only by 0.2. I thought this was a, yeah, like this shape we've got is huge. Like this cube is, you know, this is twice the size of a cube. So I didn't do a good job where we should have been modeling this more real world scale. Like I said, I always make that mistake where I go and make something. We just start and we plow through it, and then afterward I'm like, ooh, dang, like this is 100 times too large. But this random, it says relative to the node absolute. But like, I don't think that should deform those that much. Like they should be, this should be, when I turn on this random, all these should move, but they should move the tiniest little bit. It seems like a lot of them do, but then some of them are escaping, and I don't understand what that is. I guess if the random's not going to cooperate, we can use the displacer. I almost never use the displacer anymore. We remember how you often we used to use the displacer? 0.5 maybe? And give it a noise. Yeah, I saw some little movement in there. Shader, this will be real tiny. Yeah. So it doesn't take much for like those to get deformed just a little bit. And now they won't catch that perfect glint anymore. I mean, you know, even to the extent that we could duplicate that, get two of them, spin one, and there we get twice the glitter again. So maybe that'll fill up the space a little bit more. Anywho, we'll zoom out a bit. As mentioned, I wanted to make our resin a little bit more opaque. Also, as mentioned, this giant number I have of depth, if we were at a normal scale, this would probably be down to like 10. But let's make it twice as opaque and save it and start the render up again. Let's make that darker and more purpley. I'm trying in my head. I'm trying to think of what I would do if I was trying to make it so you could actually be animating the lathing process. So you'd actually be cutting through. The tricky bit would be you'd have to be. I mean, the rig for like spiraling out the material would be separate. You could still erase it out with a volume, but you'd have to have these polygons, this glitter, that would have to be getting erased out via some other mechanism. I'm not sure exactly what that would be. I mean, it could just be a giant kind of Boolean operation, but that's always dangerous. So, yeah, I think this is about as far as we're going to be able to go. The glitter's looking pretty good. Is there anything... What can I... Yeah, even the progressive rendering is... Oh, there's... It's only just popping in the opacity. So... I mean, a million things I change here. Like, first of all, we should get some nicer lighting going, something with some heavier contrast so we can get that working nicely. But as far as like resin, wood, erasing out certain parts, making parametric materials, and being able to generate like a ton of glitter, like if those were all just raw clones, like, oh my God, never, don't even think about it. But they're just polygons, like no problem. I'm trying to make it a little more foggy. See how much the glitter sneaks through. Yeah, it looks really cool here when you can actually see the depth, where here it's less so. Maybe all this gray is throwing me off. Maybe I just want to do like almost pure black. Let's do like a very saturated dark color. Was the gray coming from that? And if so, that the opacity works, the scatter color works better than I thought it would. It is a completely different thing. Oh, that's different. That's strange. That's not what I expected. I kept on grabbing the depth and making it lower, which I thought would make it more opaque. Doesn't feel like that's what it did. Because that's very transparent still. I don't know. Any other questions, especially anything that might be in regards to 26.1? Honir, can you put the node attributes panel back inside the shader graph? The node at, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, a lot of people really love the old, well, first of all, you can go back and use the old method. You can always go back and use like the old style nodes if you want to. But a lot of people really love the floating window. Maybe just restart that. But save. A lot of people really like having the attributes docked to this window. And I agree, like kind of fighting here is a little bit annoying. I mean, you could design your interface however you want, but in this case, can I can dock that right here. And if you save your layout, but I guess the problem would be like when I double click, these two will not. Oh my goodness, that's like this pixel's way too sensitive. If anybody from Maxon's watching, like that needs a little larger of a border. But yeah, like docking this here, definitely like, you know, being able to get access to your attributes via this one floating window. Agree that would probably be an improvement. This material, yeah, I'm not quite sure I'm following what that's doing. I feel like that would have looked a little different. I'm gonna start the render again just to see, but like even this material rendered out that way, so maybe I'm fundamentally not understanding something about it. Oh, here, just because I don't, let me make it way more opaque. Yeah, it's like the dark color isn't really pushing through. It's still that solid color. Could you get the glitter effect to have been done connecting a tiny noise node to a scatter scale? I don't think so. Like having that internal structure inside of it, like I think that the volume idea that somebody had, like potentially had potential where you could do like but even that would be like voxels of like incredible tiny detail. Oh yeah, Type Ogre is talking about if you actually are turning on a lathe like epoxy, you get covered in a thin layer of plastic Parmesan shavings. What's one of the guys? Let me see if I can find the channel. There's several different. Yeah, it's not very dark, but at least it's more opaque. Interesting. What's his name? Something. Oh, let me open it up in. Doop. Let me open up my YouTube in my own account where I don't get the ads and search for Lathe Brown. Oh yeah, that's the right channel. Peter Brown. So he's one of many people who does resin stuff. So I pull this over. Yeah, he's Shop Time Peter Brown. But he does, yeah, right here. Actually, you can even see him on the thumbnail. So it looks like he. Oop, I should mute. I think he shredded his tax documents, dunks them in resin, pours resin in the entire thing, and then he puts it on the lathe and starts spinning. But you'll see once he starts like actually carving. Like look at like all the messy material that you end up with. But yeah, I don't know. There's something, yeah, something so satisfying about the lathing process, though, like just melting into a material. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, how would we, Zach, if you're still here, one final question for you. How would I get blackness in here? Because essentially it's as opaque as I was aiming for here, but like, and you can see the glitter, and the glitter like disappears very quickly. So yeah, that's working pretty well. But I've got it very dark, but it's still quite light. So where does the lightness coming through? A Redshift matrix. What's an, well, maybe it's not Redshift. An RS matrix could work on the glitter, maybe. What's an RS matrix? Is there some additional attribute I don't know? Matrix. Okay, not inside the nodes. Let's say Shift C. RS matrix. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. You mean matrix scatter? Maybe. I haven't really used it, so I'm not sure what the ramifications of it are. But yeah, potentially. Well, yeah, Zach, that's not quite what I'm looking for, because I should be able to have a black opaqueness, and it could be a very thin black opaqueness. I'm not trying to make it black. I'm trying to have it, as it becomes more opaque, it becomes more black. Where here it's like, no, if there's a little bit of color, it's just color. I mean, I could get rid of all of this color and just go full on black and see what that does, but I don't think it's going to do quite what I want it to do. Also depth, well, let's jump it up to 5. Why not? Yeah, Dim is saying that it works like the Matrix but creates millions of clones at render time. So yeah, it's something I should look into, probably in my own time, instead of during a big old live stream. Let me check YouTube. Anything else pop in? Yes, I like the glitter. Oh, Taurus looked up the index of refraction, which is 1.5304. Thank you. It's probably not terrible. Yeah, see, I made it fully black, and now it's become fully transparent. So you see what I mean? I want opaqueness in it. Potentially, it'd also be nice. I do like roughness when it comes to transmission. So, like personally, I think it'd probably look pretty cool if we make it very rough transmission here. But I imagine it's going to kind of obliterate the glitter look. But yeah, I like opaque, cloudy looks, but I want it to be black. So that's something for me to look into. Any other questions? We got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if there's anything else that we didn't talk about feature-wise. I mean, we covered the major ones, and then somebody even brought up the curvature, which was the next big one that we didn't tackle. Oh, we got the relax mode. I should probably bring up the relax mode. Oh, wow, yeah, look at it, blurred the glitter to oblivion. Still looks cool, though. Yeah, thanks for the question. I enjoyed it. Ooh. You can go negative with extra roughness. Oh, extra roughness must be a modifier on roughness. Interesting. Otherwise, why would it go negative? Save, minimize. I guess we kind of only we didn't make too many scene files, so there won't be too many to show off for the Patreon file. What was I saying I was about to show? I was saying I was going to show off I remember now. The relax tool. Do we have a good model? Actually, my asset browser is messed up right now. I think probably because I linked to the beta version of a bunch of the assets, so now I can't get to my regular assets. If I go to objects, it's like oh no, maybe they're back again. Excellent. Although I want something really detailed. I mean, I can't think of a better way of doing it than the model I actually used in the demo. So this is a file from Quixel Megascans, and there's a inside of the brush tool, and you can find the brush tool under mesh. It's probably somewhere. Brushes. Nope. The brush tool is not under brushes, which I understand why it wouldn't be, but it's still weird. Where does it hide in menus? See, that's why I never use menus. Who actually uses these drop-down menus? That would take forever. Well, anyway, the shortcut just being MI. MI is the magnet tool. And there is a, and then what's MC, I think? MC, yeah, MC is the brush. So there is, in both of these tools, a new mode called Relax. So the best way to show it, I think, is to show smooth. And smooth is great. Like if you're up here and you're like, oh, I want to smooth this out. You can see I can click and it's kind of making those polygons a little bit more even and making the curvature look nice. So it's good overall. But if you start doing that here on the face, it's like, okay, it's smoothing everything out, but like it's obliterating our detail. Like, look, the face is like lost almost everything. So now there's a new mode called Relax. And the Relax mode, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it's trying to preserve the volume. So essentially the topography, the actual layout of these is fine, but they're sliding around into a new smoother position. So you can see how we didn't lose the shape of the face. The nose is pretty much still exactly where it was, but now the polygons have slid and moved around. So that's very nice. Like I think it's going to make the smooth tool. It's almost like, why would you ever use smooth now? Like well, I guess on like a corner or something that would make sense. But now you're trying to preserve the volume, so it doesn't mess up your mesh. I like it. Okay, one final check of the chat, and then we'll say goodbye. Dean says he uses drop-down menus. The problem with the drop-down, well, it's not a problem with it, but it just goes to, when it comes to the drop-down menus, I can never quite find the tool where I think it will be. Like, even there, I just, how long was I just searching? So it's like, okay, the brush tool must be in here somewhere. Maybe under, yeah, under move, under brush. But, like, I was like, is it here? Is it under brushes? No, brush tool isn't under brushes. It's like, oh, well, it's under add? Like, where is it? So it took me a while to actually find that. But I suppose once upon a time, I would go here. I guess what's good is I get so annoyed by having to navigate through menus that it forces me to learn the shortcuts. If anybody watches Tested.com, or more specifically their YouTube channel, Adam Savage from Mythbusters is like the main presenter of Tested. And he has a lot of really good philosophies on things, and he has a concept, and it's something I try and use on all of our plugins the best that I can when we're designing. And the concept, as he says it, is first order retrieval. And what first order retrieval means is, well, it means you have easy access to something. You don't have to go hunting for it. And the example he used in one video was, he was talking about, where is the software? Boop. The example that he used was, he hates drawers. Like, he hates a drawer on a shelf or on a desk. He doesn't like a drawer, because a drawer is where things go to die. You put something in a drawer and you're never going to use it. You're never going to find it. You can't see it. It's in there. It's out of the way. So in my opinion, or at least the way I think, it's like, by having to click on one of these drop downs, it's already like I'm having to open up a drawer. So it's like, okay, I've opened up a drawer now. And opening a drawer is way slower. But not only that, it's like I had to open up a drawer, and now I have to open up another drawer, and inside that drawer I have to look around for the actual item I want to finally click it. So yeah, a drawer within a drawer. In other situations, it could be like a drawer within a drawer within a drawer. And it's like, okay, this is too hard to get to. So, that will actually prevent me from potentially using something just from the extra clicks required to do it. Oh yeah, and Eric is mentioning Tested. They recently did a collaboration with Corridor, and I watched all of those videos, which are awesome. They were doing a competition between making a practical, like, blood effects knife and doing it digitally. And that tracking... The tracking software they used to, I think it was Nuke, but they had tracking software to put the stuff on the face. I was like, oh my goodness, I did not know that technology existed. It's not the type of thing I do, but it's pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, their videos are great. Clinton Jones from Corridor, well, from Corridor a little ways back, he's actually going to be presenting at Half Res in Chicago upcoming, so that's going to be pretty cool. And yeah, Ren, I've hung out with Ren a few times. He's a cool guy. Yeah. Anyway, I watch way too much YouTube. I love educational things and pseudo-educational things. Oh, I recently, actually, no, well, they showed it off in Corridor, but now you're making me think of it. And I can't play it here, but I'm going to put a link in the chat, and you guys should check this out because, first of all, if you're doing any kind of motion graphic stuff, you're going to relate immediately. But I just have to look at my history because, actually, I can probably scroll through. Yeah, James Lee and... Okay, yeah, I'm just going to link. So he does a lot of swearing in the video. But this guy does absolutely amazing... I don't even know what to call it. Like, kind of like motion graphics. But it's like he does stop motion animation on himself. And this entire video I just put in the links is him essentially complaining about Adobe products. And it's just hilarious. I love it. So, yeah, check that out. Obviously, I can't play it here in the stream. I can't play it here in the stream or it'll probably get copyright called. But I highly recommend it. Anyway, that was fun. Thank you so much for watching. Something to note is there's going to be a whole bunch of construction going on in the next 2 weeks or so. And if it's like really loud and obnoxious, there's a chance I won't be able to do the live streams because I'll be distracted to the point where I will not be able to do it. Hopefully not. It all depends on how the construction is going. The emergency stairs are getting... or you call it, the fire escape is getting rebuilt. So that's going to eat that up. But anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed the video with all the new features. And thank you so much for joining the live stream. Thank you for everybody who was donating and subscribing and subbing on Twitch especially. I appreciate that. It's always fun to talk about different YouTube channels. If anybody ever has like an amazing YouTube channel that would be worth watching, always shout it out. But in any case, if you like this content, you can always support on Patreon. If you're supporting on Patreon, you get access to all the scene files and the access to the videos early. But in any case, I think that will wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out as always. And until next time, presumably next week, I will see you then. Bye-bye.